Change tech now, and the European Council or Union has thrown its full weight behind South Africa's G20 leadership. The European Council emphasizing the bloc's commitment to strengthening ties with South Africa, describing it as a reliable and predictable partner. It comes as tensions falter between Pretoria and Washington over the recently signed Land Expropriation Act and the country's stance on the Israel-Hamas war. Let's speak now to FSN's chief correspondent, Simon Marks. He's in Washington, and also live for us in London is Olly Barratt. Simon, good evening to you, and indeed to you too, Olly. Let me start with you, Simon. South Africa will soon be sending envoys to the White House to explain not only South Africa's transformation laws, but this country's leadership of the G20 this year. How might they be received?
Well, before I answer that, Golly, let me just tell you we've got some breaking news from here in Washington, D.C. Just within the last few minutes, the White House has confirmed that President Trump has spoken to Russian President Vladimir Putin, a 90-minute conversation. And President Trump has taken to social media to say that he and Vladimir Putin have agreed immediately to spark negotiations aimed at ending the crisis in Ukraine, and that he is now calling President Volodymyr Zelensky to tell him about the conversation that just took place with the Russian leader. He says that he's asked senior figures in his entourage, including Secretary of State Marco Rubio, to lead the negotiations, which Donald Trump says he strongly believes will be successful. So that news just breaking here in Washington, D.C., and of course it has an impact on the reception that any delegation from South Africa here coming to the White House, coming to the State Department to explain the reality of South Africa's expropriation law, as opposed to the falsehoods that President Trump himself has articulated about them, as we spoke about earlier in the week. He has said on social media that South Africa is expropriating land from white farmers, is committing what he refers to as human rights abuses. So the reception that that delegation gets here is now going to be affected by the immediate flurry of activity that is going to start focusing on peace negotiations relating to Ukraine, President Trump saying that he has plans to meet Vladimir Putin, even at some point to travel to Moscow for those meetings. So this issue of the United States and South Africa is about to recede from the public attention here, take a backseat, which may create more of an opening for that those envoys from South Africa to have more of an opportunity quietly and perhaps away from some of the public focus, certainly here in Washington, D.C., to try and make progress in stepping the United States back from the brink. I mean, we already know that Marco Rubio won't be traveling to that Foreign Ministers Summit meeting in Johannesburg in, 8 days' time. He's boycotting that. But the challenge now is surely not just to lower the rhetoric and to try and correct some of the falsehoods that both the State Department and the White House have articulated, but also more broadly to put the bilateral relationship back on track so that Donald Trump, the president, doesn't boycott the full G20 Leaders Summit this coming November.
Yeah. Olly, let's come to you. The European Council president expressing the EU's full support in South Africa's leadership of the G20, along with other matters of multilateral cooperation. Do we know what prompted this kind of response or reaction from the EU?
Well, you have to assume that Donald Trump's executive orders and some of the pronouncements that he's been making about South Africa that Simon has been outlining there, and indeed Marco Rubio's decision not to attend the G20, you have to assume that that is what prompted the words that we've been hearing over the last couple of days from the European Union via the President of the European Commission, Antonio Costa, who also threw forward to the bilateral South Africa-EU summit on the 13th of March, clearly wanting to emphasize that is going ahead. We have this social media message from EU social media channels, which has been signed up to by various European ambassadors in South Africa as well. They also reiterate their support for South Africa's leadership of the G20. And what we're not seeing here, for the most part, is European leaders coming out and directly criticizing Donald Trump or his positioning on South Africa. But what we are seeing is some of them making it pretty clear that they don't agree with it through those reiterations of support for South Africa's G20 presidency and through some of their wording when it comes to their social media posts. We've seen similar from the United Kingdom over the last 48 hours or so as well. And so you have to assume that some of the responses we're seeing from European countries in their online and on-air messaging does flow through a desire to counteract some of the messaging that's coming via the White House without, as I say, directly trying to open up a diplomatic row between European capitals and Washington.
Yeah. Simon, let's conclude with you. President Trump is known and has been described as being transactional in nature. These envoys from South Africa coming to explain the laws of this country might, what kind of issues might President Trump want concessions on? And keep in mind that South Africa is a sovereign state and is at liberty to enact laws as it sees fit. The language here that's being used, Simon, is that this is tantamount to bullying and South Africa will not stand for it.
Look, I think it's going to be extremely complicated under any circumstances because, you know, we all know that Donald Trump during his first presidency and during this presidency simply is not going to prioritize Africa. And indeed, during his first presidency, of course, was reported widely to have referred to Nigeria in very scatological ways, something that Naledi Pandor, when she visited here as South Africa's foreign minister, indicated that South Africa and the continent generally wanted an apology for. That was even during the Biden administration. So the relationship has been off kilter for a while, although President Ramaphosa, of course, enjoyed a successful and warm visit to President Biden's White House a couple of years before President Biden left office. But getting back to that kind of position is going to be difficult, I think, under any circumstances. When you talk about transactional, I mean, going back to that announcement we've heard about Ukraine peace talks, President Trump has indicated that the way in which he wants Ukraine to pay the United States back for all of the largesse in terms of military aid and assistance that the United States has provided is by giving the United States access to some of the rare earths that lie beneath Ukrainian soil, those incredibly valuable natural resources. Now, South Africa is obviously also a country with substantial natural resources under its soil. I mean, when it came to Ukraine, that is the kind of transactional arrangement that Donald Trump has already publicly said he's looking for. We have no idea what concessions he might be looking for from South Africa, but I think it's pretty certain they will be transactional.
Olly, a parting shot from your side. Elon Musk has ruffled feathers in London, number 10 to be specific. The Prime Minister, I think it was a few weeks ago, having to respond to some of what was said by Elon Musk. This is someone who has a direct ear to President Trump. What's the attitude towards Elon Musk in the UK right now?
Huge levels of anxiety in government about Elon Musk and the direct line, as you say, that he has to the ear of the US president, given some of the really strong pronouncements he's made about the UK government in negative terms, including the Prime Minister himself, Keir Starmer, including several of his government ministers for a while, as Elon Musk started his almost hourly criticism at the beginning of the year over the UK government on the issue of so-called grooming gangs. Number 10 Downing Street really didn't know how to respond, if to respond at all. In the end, Keir Starmer and some of his government ministers did come out and try and push back quite strongly to some of the claims that were being made online. In terms of the British population, the polling is pretty clear. They do not appreciate Elon Musk interfering in British politics in the way that he had been at the turn of the year. But as I say, in government, real anxiety about what this all means for the weeks, months and years ahead of Donald Trump's presidency, because we had that example at the beginning of the year when the UK government was trying to talk about healthcare and education and its programme for government, and day after day it kept getting disrupted every time Elon Musk took to his own social media platform.
Olly Barratt and Washington, Simon Marks, thank you both for your time.